Today I'm going to show you how to make sourdough in a hot, humid climate. I've been baking sourdough here in Costa Rica for over 2 years. The temperature in my house is between 27 and 32 degrees Celsius. That's like between 80 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And the humidity ranges from maybe 50% to 80% depending. And I must say that it's very different from most of what I read online on how to bake sourdough. So today I'm going to show you how what method I'm using, because of course it keeps changing, and what I was doing last year isn't necessarily what I'm doing now. So I've learned a lot about overproofed dough, because in a hot, humid climate you will inevitably end up with dough that's overproofed. So I've got some tricks as to what I do to keep on top of that. Additionally, I've had 3 friends here within the last couple weeks ask me for some starter. And they're all English speaking, and I thought it's time for me to do a new video in English so that you know what to do when I hand you a little jar like this with some starter in it. The ingredients that you'll need include sourdough starter, which you can get from a friend, a little jar like this, and for this bread, lately what I've been using is harina alta fibra, so it's from the Italian discount store, and it looks just like whole wheat flour. I just use a small percentage of that. And I use this one, also from the Italian discount store. It's a very strong flour, and I find that it works really well. And salt. So I use sal marina. You can use whatever salt you like. And that's all you need. So what equipment do you need, or do I use? First of all, I mix it all up in just a plastic bowl that I got from one of those plastic stores with a lid. So there's less messing around with towels or with saran wrap or something plastic. Just use this. I have these 2 things. This is a curved plastic flexible dough scraper, and it's helpful to scrape the dough out of the bowl, you know, like this. Not necessary, but it's easier, and you end up with less residue dough. And then I use this, which is called a bench scraper. You can get this at Tips, or sometimes you can find it at some of the Amazon outlet stores, or you can always bring one in, or you can just not use one also. This is really helpful for using a wet dough, because you can kind of scoop it up off of the counter. I'll show you. What else do we have? This is a banneton, so it's like a bowl like this, and it has its own little fabric cover that I use. So if you don't have one of these, what I started with is just a plain bowl, whatever you have, and then a towel. It's not a terry cloth towel. You see, this is like fabric, or like a pillowcase might work, but just something that's not fuzzy like a normal towel. So you would just place it in the bowl, and this is your makeshift banneton. What else? You'd need a kitchen scale. This is important if you want to be exact with your measurements. When you start out, it is a good idea to use a scale. Then I've got my shower cap, which I got at the Super China store, you know, one of those. Any shower cap would do. This is to put over the banneton when I stick it in the fridge. Like this, it helps keep the top from drying out. Parchment paper I find is helpful to use to bake with, because then I don't need to sprinkle any corn flour or more extra flour in when I bake it. And I find that at Automercado. I have a little plastic tool that I use for stirring my starter. I find that really useful. Again, you can just use a spoon. And then lastly, I have this awesome, really heavy, like a Le Creuset or similar type pot. And so that's what I bake it in. If you don't have that, and certainly what I started out with was just a cookie sheet with a bit of parchment paper on the top, and that works fine too. So first you need to refresh your sourdough starter. So this one has just been fed this morning, and it's already grown. But basically, I'll show you with this new one the process of what you do. So I will give you some. Let's say I give you 40 grams. No, I'm going to say I'm going to give you 20 grams, just to make sure I have enough. So equal parts of the starter. I'm going to add the same amount of water. Give it a good mix. And then the same amount of flour. Okay, so I give that a nice mix. And then scrape down the sides as best you can to squish it all down to the bottom. Okay, and then put the rubber band down at the level that your mixture is, just like that. Then you put the top on and you set it in your kitchen in a nice warm place, which is everywhere around here. Okay, so that having been done, and you've got your starter that, as I showed you, it was big, you're ready to use it. So ready to put the main ingredients in for the dough. How can you tell if it's actually ready? There's a test called the float test. So I will show you. I have this water here. You can take a little bit of it, put it in, and the idea is that it floats. Usually this floats. So I don't know, I left it in, I had it ready and then I got busy doing something else, and so I put it back in the fridge, and so technically this is not really ready to bake with, but we're gonna pretend that it floated, and as I say, like, it always works out anyway, and it's all good, so I'm gonna just go ahead and use this. Okay, so I have my kitchen scale, my plastic bowl, and I'm gonna start with 120 grams of my starter. Nice, strong, active starter. Perfect. Okay, so then if you want to keep the same bowl or the same jar, you can see there's still a bunch extra in here. So now what I would do to refresh this is put a little bit of water in, and then shake it up, squish down the sides, and then do the flour, and then do the rubber band and put it in the fridge. So that's once you get going, and I showed you what it would be like, just like from starting from afresh. Okay, so I have 120 grams of starter, and now I'll add the water. Okay, 420 grams of water, and then I'll mix it. Just try and dissolve the starter in the water. Okay, so that's that. Then it's the high protein, like the whole wheat flour. So I'll zero it out again, 60 grams of this one. Maybe got one more left. It doesn't matter if you don't have this, the recipe would work with just plain white as well. Look at that, a quick stir, zero it out again, and add the flour. So I'm going to add 540 grams of plain white, strong pizza flour, because that's what we have here. And you use what you get, what you got, what you have. All right, just checking, 540. All right, we're good. So, time to give this another mix. The nice thing about a more wet dough is that it's easier to get all of the dry bits to be incorporated. If you use a different beginner's recipe, they put a lot more flour in, and the more flour that the dough has, the easier it is to handle. But I like this one because I don't actually have to take it out and knead it. These days I'm not into kneading anymore. That was so last year. So I like to use this also to help me mix it without getting my fingers too messy. Okay, so no dry bits remain. So I'm going to cover this, set it aside, and measure my salt. I like to measure the salt separately and just put it on top of my bowl so that I don't forget to add it later. So here's my salt, 0 on my scale. I also find that it's really useful to do this separately, because if you're doing it directly into the bowl, you inevitably put too much in, or you keep adding and the scale doesn't pick it up, or whatever, so it's just easier to have it separate. Okay, so I'm gonna just set my 15 grams on top here, and then I'll remember probably in my second stretch and fold, I'll add it in. That way I won't forget to do it, but the dough is supposed to form better if you don't have the salt, because the salt is a hindrance to the yeast. So that's what I do. So now we're going to set the timer for 30 minutes and then come back and do a stretch and fold. A quick note on the starter. So when you start getting into it and you start ending up with this jar, you have to estimate what you have in there and think about what time you want to bake next and how much starter you want to have. So what I like to do to keep a relatively small amount of starter in the fridge is end up with about 40 grams for this loaf. So since there's like, what, maybe 5 in here, I would do maybe 20, just to be safe, of water and 20 of flour, and mix it up and set it and let it kind of rise, and then stick it in the fridge when I've seen that it's gone above the rubber band, when it's doubled above the rubber band. And then tomorrow, or whenever I next decide that I want to bake, I just take it out and I know that I've got about 40 grams in it, so then it's ready to do 40 more grams of flour, 40 of water, and then I'll have approximately 120 for this loaf. If you're making a different loaf, or if you're not planning to bake very often, you probably want to just minimize how much starter that you have, so that when you are ready to bake and it'll be super hungry, you can just add the flour and the water and it will start to multiply, and it'll get ready to bake with quicker. If you have like a load of it hanging out in the fridge, then you're going to end up with loads of discard and you have to figure out what to do with it, or throw it out, and I don't like to waste things. So yeah, dealing with the starter is something you also get the hang of over time. You can always call me. Okay, let's have a look. So it still looks a lot like sludge here. So you can use this. You can also, I would recommend with a wet dough, to use wet fingers and just grab the side of it and pull it over. So you see how if I pull it, it will actually break pretty easily, and that changes as it goes on. But just grab each side with wet fingers and then fold it over the dough, or over the middle. So just do that a few times. There you go. And then I'll cover it up and set the timer for 30 more minutes. Okay, the second fold. Wet my hand. You can see now I can pull it and it reaches farther before it feels like it's going to break. So the elasticity is increasing. I'm going to now add the salt. The problem with adding the salt a little bit later is that you have to knead it a bit more. If you add it at the start and it's mixed in with the flour, then this isn't an issue. But anyway, you can feel the salt on the surface. I'll give it a few more folds, really, to just try to get that salt in. All right. And we'll cover it and come back in another half an hour. Last stretch and fold. You can see it's got a bit softer. And now it's quite elastic. It's a lot easier to pull, and it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. I notice my hands aren't all sticky, which I like. I don't have another sink problem going here. Okay, I'm gonna set the timer now for 2 hours. Probably a little bit less, actually, because I've been leaving it longer than half an hour. And then I will turn it out and we'll move to the Banneton step. Okay, here we are. So 2 hours is up and I'm ready to have a look and put the dough into the Banneton into the fridge overnight. So let's have a look at the dough. Technically, for checking, for proving, I'm gonna just wet my finger. If you poke it, you see how it kind of came back up. So if you poke it and it stays in like that, maybe this is a little bit overproofed, then that's overproofed. But if you poke it and it bounces back, I think this is pretty perfect actually, because it comes right back up. If you poke it and it just bounces back up immediately, then it hasn't had enough time to proof. So at any rate, we're gonna just do it anyway. What I'll do, just give the area that I want to use a little spray and clean it off. And then I'll spread some flour down. And then I will pour out the dough into the flour. It's really sticky because there is a high percentage of water, as I mentioned. So you see, this really helps to get all of it out and leave as little dough as possible, which is great for not clogging up your pipes. Yes, there's a story there. I clogged up the pipes, basically. Okay, so I got most of it out. That's great. And now I'm gonna go about trying to, just a little bit wet fingers, to stretch it into a square. Or a rectangle, or whatever I can do. I can see the bubbles there are bubbles in here. I don't know what that is. Okay, so once it's like that, I'm gonna fold it in half, or in thirds, and then in thirds the other way, and then I'll roll it up. So, like this. There. Okay, I sometimes try and like knit the sides. But you see, I really didn't have to knead this dough at all. And here it is. And then this is when this becomes useful, because it's helpful to just lift it up. You don't have to, like I could lift it, really. Okay, into the Banneton then. So here's the Banneton. I'm gonna put some flour into that. And just like paint it down the sides, try and get it to stick. Get it all over myself. It's like my usual state is covered in flour over here. Okay, so lots of flour in the Banneton. And then we'll just pick this up and plop it in so that this top bit, there. And that's it. So now it's ready for its final overnight proof, and then it will be ready to bake anytime tomorrow. All right, until then. Okay, next day. It's been about 24 hours, so let's have a look. So it's got a little bit bigger, it's not too bad. Sometimes, as I mentioned, I kind of pull the sides in to give it more of a balanced bottom, really. But it doesn't matter. As I say, it always just turns out somehow. Anyway, so I'll stitch the top a bit like that if it needs to, if it's come apart. And then get a bit of parchment paper. I've already preheated the oven to 450 degrees with my big red pot inside. Pour that down. You can see it's already covered with flour a bit. So then I score it. So this is my special, it's like a razor, but you can use a knife. One big gash across the top. And then I make it a little bit deeper. You can make pretty designs on the side, but today I'm just gonna do this. So there you see it. I'll grab the pot. All right. into the oven. So I set the timer for 30 minutes and then I will decrease the temperature and take the top off. And I'll show you what it looks like. Beautiful. And here it is. Beautiful. Just gets a bit browner those last half hour with the top off. So there you have it. You can check to see if it's really done by turning it over and tapping on the underside. It's supposed to sound hollow. So that's it. It's best to let it cool for 2 hours because it's easier to cut, but it's so delicious straight out of the oven. I hope you like this bread, this recipe. Okay, so it's been cooling for a few hours. I'm gonna cut into it and let's check it out. Delicioso. It's got some big holes, some small. It's delicious. I hope you give it a go. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.